Just now, we'll read our minutes.
No.
Hi, Phillip. Ooh.
No, I'm good. No, I'm good.
CEO gets a bigger guy.
Yeah, right. That's always how it works.
Put in the batteries. Such an awful one.
The batteries provide 20 storage max. So it's a two purposes. They have a little bit of storage, 1 day storage. And also kind of, they start with levels up. I go to the substation because when it's sunny in the day, no, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they just peak to band time. Get home. Hit the lights. That's when it's power. So we need that short term.
Did you bring the information for the DOT? Yes. Okay.
It only works like once a month.
Yeah.
Just how- panels keep better and better.
A motion to accept the minutes for February 13th.
Motion to accept minutes for February 13th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Come on up. We might as well just, we have order of conditions. We, one of us went to the property to look at this. It looks fine, apparently.
Good.
So all we need to do is, Mr. Fiegel asked for a certificate of compliance for a piece of property. Mr. Demetrius went out to inspect it. It was fine, it met compliance. We are now issuing a certificate of compliance, so I need a motion to issue.
The project was done in, it was 1991. It was an old project that had never been, previous boards hadn't inspected it, so,
Well, somebody has to
yeah.
submit a certificate of compliance
Yeah,
for us to
so-
do that, so many properties don't have it anyway. Okay, can I have a motion to issue the certificate of compliance?
Make a motion to issue a certificate of compliance on
300
300
Old
Old West Warren Road, Lot 3.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so this is what we're gonna do. Oh, Corinne, you will fill this out, and we'll just put the signature on the back.
Okay.
Did you do complete? All right, I just need a pen. And they'll just do this on the computer?
Okay, so you want me to mail it to them then, on Wednesday?
Oh, we could do it right now, I suppose, if you have neat enough handwriting to fill it in. You put your Hancock on that too?
I can do that if you want.
Yeah. You can fill it in right now.
Okay.
Sure. It does, we need a copy that goes under your name.
Right, I can go make copies. I have a key to that room.
I need to set the registry.
That's the
original,
original,
right? Yeah.
Well, we can copy it. You get the original.
I know, right? Should have been easier for you guys. Yep. Is this part of it too? Yep.
That's a file.
That's the file, don't lose that.
No.
It's history.
Don't lose that. Just give us a second.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Look what happens.
Oh, my God.
5 minutes. You were supposed to keep them up there longer.
Don't you, I saved you a seat, didn't I?
Yes. No, okay.
No, I don't want your rush, I just want to see what that.
Joyce.
Financial
Yeah,
marker.
very good.
Yes, sir.
I was gonna say, there's a.
Good, yeah, I like black ones.
There's a pen right here on the side.
Good?
That works.
Been done
Uh,
how many years now?
Do you have payroll stuff that you can hand us? We can do that.
I do. I also have a certified mail receipt that I need reimbursement for, because we didn't have enough petty cash, because she didn't give us the petty
Is
cash.
it, is, okay,
So
sure.
it's a receipt that I have to turn into pound.
All right, do you have, all right, expenses should be on there. Is that the only expenses that we have to pay?
That's all we have for now.
Seriously?
Mhm.
For now, as in like this week?
Yep.
Really? Really?
I
All
didn't
right.
get the bill yet for the ad, so,
For the what?
for the ad that we placed in the paper for the DOT. I did not get that bill yet.
Okay. You make a motion to ratify payroll?
Motion for ratify payroll. February 16th, 2019 for 124.66, 126.44.
Yeah,
The 23rd for 106.48.
yeah,
March 9th for 153.06.
yeah.
March 16th for 85.61, 86.51. Like 69.
I know. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Cow's kicking
Alright, this is for you, we're good.
Got her nervous. She heard. Go on.
We got a letter from a resident on Little Rest Road asking for help in determining excessive water source that's affecting the property after snow melt or a big rainstorm. There's about 4 inches of water over the full width of the road for a bit. And then running onto people's properties. I'm shortcutting the letter. It's causing driveway washouts and excessive amounts of silt and debris scattering throughout front yards, causing large ponding, which leads to settlement in mud once the water subsides. The highway superintendent said he would excavate leaf-covered roadside swale and lowering the depth if needed, attempting to keep water on the opposite side of the road. So their question is, with that amount of water running down one side of the road, could it cause undermining road and caving? I don't have the answer, that should be the highway guy.
Inspection date.
Good.
Okay? I hear the question, but I don't know that,
Is it a conservation issue? Even?
It's not a
in wetlands
conservation,
or anything like
no.
that, so
it's not, it's a
it's a highway issue.
It's a highway issue. I can send them an email though.
I mean, if it's a stormwater issue, could be caused by somebody's property, you have to deal with it.
Can you send that back? All right, can I have a motion to ratify, to pay Corinne back for paying for mailing? $8.30.
I'll make a motion that we reimburse Corinne $8.30 for mailing something.
Yep, to ZPT Energy.
Which one?
ZPT,
ZPT Energy, correct.
second, all in favor?
Aye.
Sign, please. Nick, you have a minute. You want to set up?
Sure, why not?
I'll wait for Corinne to come back.
Okay.
Thank you.
No,
Just-
I'll explain the changes.
Here, you can have this.
Quick changes.
I don't want to take your copy.
Or
It's
mine.
okay, it's fine. I have a big copy.
Couple extras here.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay,
Ready to go?
we are ready to
Okay.
go. We need to open the public hearing for Cutler Road,
Correct.
and it's lot 4.
Yes. So for the record, Nick Fasandola, Level Design Group, here on behalf of the applicant for a continued notice of intent filing. Picking up where we left off at the last meeting, we've submitted revised plans addressing the concerns detailed at the last meeting, which were adding a deep sump and hook catch basin at the end of this swale, in this area right here before the basin, as we had proposed originally on this basin. And then we also added some stone check dams, stone within gabion baskets to be installed about every 100 feet within the proposed grass swales to provide additional sediment removal. And there's a detail of the gabion basket on the detail sheet. Other than that, that's all we talked about at the last meeting. You know, from the since the last meeting, the chair did send out an email with some additional questions and items, which we provided a written response to. That was emailed over to you and other members, and revised plans associated with those comments were submitted, I believe, Monday morning. That's all we got. Any questions on the letter or your concerns?
Sure. I'm gonna start with, you have in 7.2, is that on another site? You say some measures to remove solids from basin 8 in 7.2. Did you mean 9, or did you mean that you actually put them on the other site that's on, in Warren? Site 3, is this 4? Yep,
Correct.
you just meant basin 9, right?
Yes, this is basin 9.
Right.
Yes.
You wrote in 7.2, put sumps, did you put sumps on
No, we
the
did
other
not.
basins?
No, just
Only on this
basin.
site?
Correct, the one
Okay.
that was already there.
Alright. Just wondering, I thought.
We
well,
did add it to, I'm sorry, we did add the catch basin and check dam to this basin.
Right.
Inside of the buffer zone as requested in your letter, in addition to what we talked about in the meeting,
Okay,
the last meeting.
right, yeah, alright, we did see that. Okay, so, question number 2, measures to ensure water from basins infiltrate versus flow overland into wetlands and doesn't increase temperature of wetlands, alter it. And, so your answer, wow, you know, there's a couple of things that I'm not really sure if I'm in agreement with. You said, TSS removal is provided within the swales and a series of check dams, which is great, within the deep sump and hooded catch basin inlets to the basin. Stormwater is then detained within the basin and released at a control rate to mitigate the peak flows into the bordering vegetated wetlands. It is released at a controlled rate, but it's not released to do anything about the wetlands. That's just the way it comes out of
The
the,
stormwater design, correct, yeah, I mean, that's
I
how,
mean,
that's how
right.
stormwater basins work, you create an impoundment and then you design
Right,
it
so
out
I
with-
mean, I'm just like, you're taking kudos for something that isn't necessarily there, so I'm
Just kinda-
rolling my eyes a little bit at that.
giving the full description of what's going on
Right,
and how we comply with the current standards.
there's no measures that can be implemented to ensure that the flow of the basin is fully or mostly infiltrated. I mean, the outflow of the basin. Is there not a way to figure out where that water is going?
Which water?
The outflow of the basin, which is what our conversation was about.
Correct, I mean, it ultimately flows towards the resource area.
Right, and so there's no way to see if there's infiltration at all, there's no I mean, you're able to calculate all kinds of stuff
Correct.
before the basin, but there's, suddenly the calculations disappear after the basin, so what happens with,
I mean, that's all included in the curve numbers that are associated with, as I described.
well, the
further-
curve numbers
further
are
in the
about
water.
how much goes onto the site,
Correct.
and based on what the existing landscape looks like, but it does it include
It does include that.
the numbers
If
after
you-
the basin,
the-
after it leaves the basin?
Well, no, we're not analyzing further downstream of what's happening down here. We're analyzing
What comes out of the pipe?
what's going towards the resource area.
Right, and so once it leaves the pipe,
Correct.
our question is, what happens to that water? It just flows over
It
land?
flows on its natural path where it was going before the project was created.
Well, the natural path wasn't,
That's a process, nothing.
okay, so the natural path is, how many acres of land is this going into that basin? Just,
About
40,
No, not even close.
5.
Probably less than that. We have two basins, it's pretty much cut right down the center here, and it's just essentially this portion right here. It's a very small system. The entire site is about 40 acres.
Well, that's what we're talking about, because the basin's collecting all the
Well,
water.
yes, I'd say.
You know what I mean? So
the-
you're saying there's a little bit of water here, but we're saying your stormwater calculations put all the water in the basins, right?
Two basins on a whole
And then
site.
dump it out the bottom. Well, that's not the natural flow of the existing water.
Right,
No, it collects the water from the
Right, but you're
system.
saying it's a natural flow, and it's not the natural flow.
It continues on its natural flow path. That's correct.
A new natural flow path.
There
It's
is
not
a
even
new-
natural, it's a
right.
man-made flow path.
I mean, I hate to, I can't recreate the wheel when it comes to stormwater analysis, the stormwater management standards, and what's accepted, and how these calculations are prepared. They've been reviewed by a third-party consultant engineer. Everything's in line. There's no funny business going on here. I don't know why we're being
well,
treated
our-
like we're trying to pull a fast one on the commission. We're collecting the water in a detention basin, and we're providing a controlled outlet situation. And that water from the detention basin will be discharged at a controlled rate on its natural path. And that path does end up into the on-site wetland and off-site wetland.
Sure, yes,
That's
it
correct.
does. So the question was, can you,
And no, we
It-
cannot, and to answer your questions, no, we cannot infiltrate additional water. We have a situation where these wetlands are created because we have poor soils, C&D soils. These wetlands are here because it's surface runoff, which is it being impounded in these wetland areas to create these wetlands. And if for some reason I was able to collect this water, infiltrate it, I'd be drying up these wetlands, which is against the Wetlands Protection Act. I cannot modify the hydrology of this area to that extent.
okay, that wasn't really my question.
That was part of the questions that were in the email.
It was part of the question. My question was about the water temperature, and if you wanna go back and forth, when you have a forested area with C&D soils, you have the water slowly dripping onto the ground, and it has time to infiltrate in the C&D soils, whereas the panels create a whole new way of stormwater behavior. The second thing that you're saying here is that as if the panels and cutting trees hasn't changed, you have mentioned something about we can't change the way.
No, what I said, all I did was I detailed the process, which is approved. but by-
Changing groundwater patterns. You already changed you are changing
No,
groundwater patterns.
We're changing surface water patterns to be collected in this area and discharged through
Removing
here.
trees and,
And that's all included, as I detailed in the calculations.
Right.
Under the TR 55 standard approved method, the curve number includes what's called the initial abstraction, which includes tree cover.
Right.
Any water that's taken up by trees. That's why you select, when you're doing the calculations, wooded, good ground cover, and those curve numbers are developed to account for those items.
sure,
And that's how the calculations have been done for the last 20 years in the state of Massachusetts.
so there's not been a lot of projects on this scale for solar panels for the past 20 years, and we're making an assumption that this is a slightly different animal. It doesn't have catch basins, storm drains, it's not a shopping mall, it's a very different animal. So we're just trying to be realistic based on what we have seen around town and how the stormwater is behaving on the current solar sites, and how it's affecting and impacting our roads and the neighbors and the neighboring properties, which isn't fabulous. And so we have concerns, despite the fact that these are the standards that the state and the handbook, which is being followed maybe or maybe not fully sure. We didn't have our peer reviewer do it. It was plannings. We're saying, all right, you cut down a bunch of trees, you put down a bunch of panels, you're allowed to make those things pervious, which they're not. They're changing the way that water behaves, and so we're just trying to get a grasp on what is really happening, and not versus what you can do on paper. And every time we ask that, you get angry with us, and we're just
But I
trying.
mean, I
And I
but
understand
you
that
have to
we're
understand my
frustrated.
position. There's requirements and standards which we design these to.
There's,
And-
yeah, I understand that there's also things that you don't have to do, like you don't have to account for infiltration, you don't have to account for, I get it,
Mhm.
you don't have to do that. But what we're saying is, I don't care if you have to do it or not, we're trying to look out for the neighbors of this project and make sure that they don't get inundated with an excessive amount of water on that steep slope that goes down to Old Douglas Road. And the wetlands, which won't dry up. If the wetlands also, 90% of the wetlands get their water from groundwater, not overland water. Look it up.
Beg to differ. Wetland is a
So
hydric soil, which is inundated with water, surface water. That creates the hydric soil conditions. That's why you get that black mucky soil within the first. I mean, yes, there is high groundwater, which means when surface water does reach the wetland, it doesn't infiltrate and it ponds on the surface. So that's why a wetland is, that's part of the reason why a wetland is created. I'm not a wetland scientist, I'm not gonna sit here and say I wrote the book on wetlands, but I am knowledgeable in that field with regards to hydric soils, being a licensed soil evaluator. I've taken many courses and seminars through the years on wetland formation and hydric soils. But I mean, just going back to your questions, I understand your concerns. And I mean, we can't design for something that's not there today. We designed everything to be the runoff from this area to be collected and treated and detained and then released. I can't make a basin that's gonna hold all the water. I
You
can't
don't
make a
want it to
basin
hold
that's
all the
gonna,
water.
that's
Again-
gonna infiltrate all the water. Then if you're trying to address an issue that's not a requirement, can you tell me what the issue is?
The issue would be the water temperature changing the wetlands in the summer months. And then just overall, we just wanna make sure that what comes out of the basins, whether it's, and can you even put that in West Brookfield? Didn't they reject that project? I mean, is that being moved?
Excuse me?
The outflow in Basin 9 is in West Brookfield.
100% approved.
It's approved by West Brookfield.
Correct. We have all permits in hand for the town of West Brookfield
Huh,
for those two sites.
I heard that it was rejected.
Nope. We have all our approvals. I'm on record saying that, and I'm 100% confident about that.
Huh, okay.
And there's no, this is all common ownership. This parcel in West Brookfield, in
Right.
Warren. As long as I'm not sending water to a different watershed, I can put an outlet over here, I can put an outlet over there. There's no code requirement or standard that says I can't cross a town line with a drainage.
Right, I was under the misunderstanding apparently
No problem.
that the project was rejected and therefore that may not be. Okay, so if I were in a butter up there, I would be concerned about the location of that. Yes.
I do have one question.
Mhm.
Now, when you're doing the calculations
Yes.
and everything with the soil,
Mhm.
are you factoring the 5 inches of wood chips that you're adding in on top of that?
with regards to,
Well, you guys wanna add 5 inches of wood chips on top of the soil.
correct,
How are you factoring that into your equations, but how it's gonna affect?
what negative impact would the wood chips have? I mean, it's essentially
It's
creating.
not gonna run off.
It's a more pervious surface than, say.
Well, you use it for erosion control, so it's gonna trap the water, and wood chips will absorb a lot of the water, it's not gonna,
Correct.
it's not, so would that dry up the wetland? You
No.
just said we can't dry up the wetland if we put it in the
You're
ground, but
correct.
we can now now the wood chips can absorb all the water, and it's not gonna affect the wetland? I don't understand.
And to be honest, the final cover is still to be determined by the.
Well, I don't know, can you go address that question? I don't
Improvement.
understand. You just got done telling us if any of the water goes into the groundwater, if the
No,
outlet
no.
goes into into the groundwater.
What I was saying,
you're gonna say
we
you're gonna dry
can't-
up
we
the
can't make a
Well, let me
substantial
just finish-
change
Let me
if-
just
if-
finish my question, please.
Okay.
You just got done saying, look, maybe I misunderstood what you said. You said if we change the basins and you try to infiltrate the groundwater, it's gonna dry up the wetland. Because the wetlands are formed by the water coming off the ground filling up the wetland. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. If you put 5 inches of wood chips on there, you're putting it on there for erosion control, wood's absorbent, wood's gonna suck up the water, it does a perfect job, I love it. It's gonna absorb up all that water,
It's not gonna absorb all the
it's
water.
gonna work, it's gonna absorb a lot of it.
It's not gonna-
Then if it's not gonna absorb it, then what good is it for erosion
I've
control?
been to multiple
You know what I mean?
sites.
If-
I've been to-
no, I'm just-
I'm stating for the record, my personal observations. I've been to multiple sites developed by Seaboard Solar that use wood chips, and there's still plenty of water that runs off.
Well,
and
then
makes
it
to
doesn't
the
work
detention
as an
basin.
erosion control then, right?
It's not an erosion control, it's a final ground
It's a
cover.
stabilizer, it's an erosion control.
Correct, you can use loam
But
and
it's supposed to
seed.
stabilize the ground and keep it from washing. If the water's running through there, it's washing it out. I mean, if you got water if you got water pouring out of these wood chips on the bottom of that hill, like you're saying, that, to keep the wetland full, then the wood chips aren't doing their job.
Well, for the record, the water from this site in particular, is gonna flow towards the swales. And the swales are gonna direct the water to the detention basin. Not all of it's gonna come hammering through the site down to the detention basin. And yes, there may be some areas of channelized flow which need to be repaired periodically, as you would have if you do loam and seed, any of that nature. When you have a large cleared area like this, we're not saying this is gonna be okay, go in there, install it and leave. This is gonna be under continual maintenance for the duration of the life cycle of the project, which is about 25 years. So depending on certain rainfall events, there may be rutting that needs to be repaired. The wood chips will eventually degrade, they'll have to be seeded. There's a full maintenance plan that's associated with this type of ground cover.
So is the water gonna stay on the site coming out of that basin?
It's gonna continue on its natural flow path, which goes down the hill.
So it's gonna impede on the neighbor's property?
Where it goes today.
Not at that rate, it doesn't go there today.
Based on the calculations, the discharges are
So,
less than
Okay,
or
so,
equal
okay,
to the
so,
existing
all right,
flows.
okay, based on your argument right there,
Yes,
okay, then you're saying that the land is completely impervious. You're saying all of it's washing right off the land and going down
I am
towards the
not
neighbor's
saying
land?
that.
Well then.
Saying based on the soils, the map soils, and the inputs for the ground cover that were used in the calculations, X amount of water leaves the site or makes it down towards what they call the control points or reaches. Many of those areas are the wetlands.
Is it gonna,
Some of the control points, this control point right here is this property line. So I calculated
So-
based on hold on one second. I calculated in the report how much water goes to this person's property line, this area right through here.
okay,
And I made sure not to increase, I actually substantially decreased that amount of water. And then everything that comes down to the wetland, we calculated. We made sure not to increase those values.
how many
Those are the
gallons of water did
requirements.
you figure?
I don't have that answer.
Take a guess, 1,000, let's just pick a fictitious number. Let's say it's 10,000 gallons, all right,
Mhm.
just a number out of the sky. 10,000 gallons and it's spread out of, how long is that lot, 500 feet? I don't know what it is, I don't have the map in front of me.
Yeah, it's about 1,000 feet.
1,000 feet, so you got a 10,000 gallons spread over 1,000 feet. So that's not too bad on my neighbor's property, but now you're taking 10,000 gallons of water, you're putting it in a basin, you're shooting out a 10-inch pipe. So now the 10,000 gallons is no longer going all the way up and down the neighbor's property, up on the top. It's all coming out down the bottom where you're creating 10,000 gallons of water that didn't come down in that one point.
Released at a slower rate.
it's still released, and the state laws,
I mean,
but the state laws are
I mean, can I
required.
go on the record? I can't rewrite the stormwater standards.
I'm
These
not
are the
trying to get you to
approved
relight
methods.
the stormwater standards,
The-
but there's a state law standard that says you can't, there's a reasonable effect that you can't reasonably dump your water on another person's water. When you're taking 10,000 gallons and you're channeling it onto somebody's property, that's a little unreasonable.
This is not that situation. This water, this is the top of the hill. The water flows down the hill.
In a sheet,
No,
Relatively.
it only sheet flows, when you calculate stormwater, if you go by the rules, you can only sheet.
I'm not
you
going by
only
rules.
calculating-
Let's go look, I mean,
But
on the
I'm
existing
talking about
site.
the requirements and the calculations that are needed to be provided as part of the stormwater management policy.
Right.
That's all I can work with here.
Well,
We don't
are-
disagree that you can, that's all you get to work
Okay.
with, but you can keep the water on your property. That's the problem, is if you're
You
taking all
cannot keep
the.
all this water leaves the property. There's no physical way to keep all this water
in
on the property.
in 1,000 feet it leaves it. It doesn't leave it in 10 inches.
No, but there's a slew of other things that come into play here that, as a professional licensed engineer, I account for in my calculations, which have been reviewed and approved by the third-party consulting engineer. Another thing that comes into play, you consider time of concentration. How long does it take for one drop of water from this point to get to this point? Okay? Right now, it goes in a straight line. In the proposed situation,
It's like I said, it doesn't go in a
it's gonna
straight line.
come down here, it's gonna get trapped in the swale, it's gonna hit these check dams and be slowed down, make it to the detention basin, be detained, and then discharged. That also comes into play when you determine how much water is leaving the site and leaving the basin.
But the point is, that one drop, you're talking in circles. First you said it doesn't go in a straight line, now you said that one drop goes in a straight line and it's gonna get caught in the swale. So either it does or it doesn't. I agree with you, it goes in a straight line, but
In
that
an
one
in the
drop of
existing
water.
condition, it goes in the straight
But the
line.
one drop of water goes across, all the way across. Now you've got the one drop of water going into the swale, combining with 1,000,000 drops of water dumping down at the bottom onto the neighbor's property at the bottom. That's the concern,
No,
is that you're gonna change.
You're seeing it the wrong way. We're increasing the time it takes for this drop of water to go from here to here. Right now, it just goes, it comes,
Okay,
with
so
no obstructions.
But it's one drop.
With no,
talk
It's not-
about how that works.
what?
Let us, how does that work? You're decreasing the time it takes from the water to get.
No, we're increasing the time. So if you increase the
You're
time,
increasing
you
the
have
time.
additional time.
Okay, so you're
for-
increasing the time, so tell us how that works. The water goes on the panel, it runs off,
Runs up
and then it gathers with all the other water and goes
to the swale.
to the swale.
Then takes a hard right, comes down here, slowed down by the check dams as sediments and other solids would settle out in the swale.
Sure.
It's dumped into the catch basin,
Right.
into the basin fills up.
So 72
Water.
hours later, it empties, all of it empties out onto that one spot,
Or the water
or
does.
two spots.
Correct, this water does empty out in this area where all this is going in an existing condition.
But the water, the basins don't fill up. You got the outlet at the bottom of the basin.
It's 4 or
The
6 inches
basin
up.
does, the water goes over the top of the pipe, that's how these work.
I mean, you're not holding it in the basin.
So it's going to be,
Pretty much going right out. You're saving a little bit, but if on a 100-year storm, it's not, right?
Correct, a lot of water is continually flowing off this site based on the poor soils and existing hydrology. So yes, water is gonna continually leave this basin once it hits that bottom outlet pipe. Just as when it rains, water flows off the site continually, all the way down the hill towards the pond.
but again, and I hear what you're saying, I understand what you're saying. You have these constrictions with your stormwater, The rules.
Excuse me, for the record, following the state-approved rules and regulations.
right?
Yes, I'm following the rules and regulations
And-
outlined by the state of Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection.
The rules and regulations, again, are designed for parking lots and shopping malls and not a
There's
giant.
no specific that says parking lots and shopping malls in
So
those
you are
requirements.
taking, we still have 2 points, 2 exit points on this versus an entire, and that piece of water that landed over there on that upper left-hand corner isn't really going to be gathering with the other ones and rushing downhill. And I understand what you're saying, you're taking the time, it's slowing it down, it's gonna be held in the basin, but the water is still leaving only 2 points versus all of that water that used to go and all of these various parts are really
So-
making their way.
So for the record, say this was a shopping mall, we
Right.
paved all this, right? Stormwater system collects all the water. In previous projects this board's approved, has this been an issue, having a single discharge point? Have you approved projects in the past that collected water in a stormwater management system and had a discharge point? A pipe,
Yes, of course,
an outlet structure? So this is no different than those projects.
it is not.
It is no different in the calculation
only thing
standpoint
that is-
and scenario standpoint. If this was a mall, a parking lot, and next to a residential neighborhood here, it would still be the same configuration. You'd collect the stormwater, you detain it, and it would be discharged via a pipe, an outlet control structure, and that would be in 1 or 2 places, just like this design is.
But not on somebody's property.
It's residential, not commercial.
All the discharge points are on our property, and they're over 200 feet away from the property line, as required by the solar bylaw with the natural buffer. We're leaving plenty of room for the discharge points.
Yes.
At the planning board meeting,
Mhm.
we had I think, a productive, about 45-minute meeting. And
Bless you.
you conceded to Mr. Ramsey that we would be looking at increasing or the capacity and/or number of culverts going underneath the road because of the increase in the water, how quickly it was going, not the volume, but the rate. So that was talked about. And if you go back to this, the next one, C1-1, it doesn't show any of that on there. Has that been looked at yet, as was discussed with Mr. Ramsey, or not?
So, for the record,
Because
okay,
I
I'll describe to the
have
board,
other
to the board
points
what,
that go with this.
okay, let me describe to the board what actually happened.
No,
So-
I was there, I know what happened.
So the abutter here raised concern about an existing culvert underneath Cutler Road extension in this area right through here. Claimed it was overwhelmed by existing conditions. Showed a video during a rainfall event which showed the water going in the pipe, going under the section of the roadway and being discharged.
2 inches of rain, just not an unusual.
Oh, and the culverts, how come the culvert's not shown on the plans?
The culvert's here. Corrugated metal pipe culvert right here. Comes out of wetland W and then connects to the, and that's
Double line.
And this, that wetland feeds into the center wetland, which was expanded upon when we had our first, first few meetings
Yep,
with the additional wetland area that kind of comes through here. So what was discussed was, you showed the video, the culvert seemed to be working as it should be. It wasn't overtopping or anything. There, water does back up in this area right through here, which probably created this wetland. We said to the board, the planning board, we'd be more than happy to fund improvements to add new culverts underneath Cutler Road extension on this area. But we're not going to be doing it under this permit. A, it's a town-owned road. We can't do anything without the town's blessing. B, it would require significant disturbance within the existing buffer zones and possibly existing wetland areas. So that need a separate notice of intent filing, possibly filed by the town to do the additional work. So we said to the planning board that we would work with them. If they want me to design that, I'd be more than happy to, but this is something that's gonna be done down the roadway. We'd have to coordinate with the highway department and see how they wanna handle it. We'd have to come back to this board because we'd most likely be disturbing part of this existing wetland and creating a new discharge point to this wetland. So we said, that's not part of this scope. We'd be more than happy to fund additional repairs or additional culverts needed in the roadway as part of our special permit approval, but we are not including that as part of this scope because of the additional permitting it requires, the fact that it's a town-owned right-of-way without permission from the town, we can't even make the applications on that type of work. But we're more than happy to work with the town on achieving something. And on the same note, if you put new culverts in up here and bring more water down this way, you're increasing the amount of water which is going to be going towards this wetland, downstream. And so downstream impacts need to be evaluated because you're going to be adding, if you want to take all this water from this wetland and this, on the side of this property right here, and then just pipe it over with no detention, with no mitigation for peak flows, and just kind of stick pipes under the ground and send the water that way, you might have downstream issues which need to be evaluated. Which we're not proposing under this current project, but we'll work with the town.
Can I get back to that for a second? The point is, years ago, the whole, where Site 3 was logged, and when that happened, that's when the storm drain started to run at capacity. Now, that was just from a thinning,
Right.
just from a thinning of the trees, not completely wiping them out, which is what's being proposed here.
Right.
So logically, we're concerned that now wiping all the trees out is going to increase that even further. And that's where, the point came up that additional culverts or increasing the size of the existing ones would be necessary to not wash the road out.
Sure.
That being said, that does mean, it concedes the point that water will be moving from A to B, Site 3 to 4, more rapidly during a storm. That's the whole point of what's being talked about here, is water is moving from A to B more rapidly. But it's not just Site 4, which is what we're talking about tonight. Now we have additional water more rapidly getting into Site 4
Sure.
as a result of
Right.
this solar project. This is the concern.
Your peak runoff's not gonna go up,
Correct,
so it's not gonna be more rapid then.
correct.
I have a hard time believing that because of the trees being
Yeah.
taken, thinned out.
You would
and now
think
they're
so, but
gonna
that's
be-
why he's detaining the water, to slow it down. I
You got-
understand what he's saying within the.
And as you
within the
guys saw
laws.
in the previous submission, there's 3 large detention basins on Lot 3. It's a much bigger project than Lot 4, but
I don't see them as,
we are,
I don't see them as basins, they're funnels. The pipes are at the bottom. They're not really catching much water before they're ejecting it out. So we're not really slowing anything down, we're just directing it.
Redirecting it and
Concentrating.
concentrating
Redirecting
it.
it, yes. And this is the concern.
Sure. I hear that.
I do have that video with me, so if you're interested, it is here.
You have what?
I have the video that I
Oh,
took
okay.
and the data.
The problem we see, and I have practical experience with it as well, on solar fields. I'm willing to, you wanna go on a ride tomorrow, I'll take and show you the problem.
I bet you there's plenty of poorly constructed solar fields.
Well, this wasn't a poorly constructed solar field. It was very well, it was extremely well done, as a matter of fact. But the problem is that, and I had talked to the guy before, I didn't do it, I'm doing some more work there, but I had talked to the guy before he did it, and I explained to him, be careful about doing all the super grading, because you're gonna be breaking into the groundwater, you're gonna have weeping, and you have more water than was calculated in the stormwater. And that's exactly what's happened is, your stormwater calculations are accurate for stormwater. But you start digging in the groundwater, you have breakouts over this whole area, do some grading, now you get a lot more water to do. This site had a 1,000-foot long gradient driveway with 6-inch riprap and swales, just like you proposed. All the 6 inches in a big humongous pile at the bottom of 1,000 feet. There's so much water coming through the ground. It's not, the stormwater counts weren't right. So they didn't factor in all the amount of groundwater that was already in the basins, to fill in the basins. And that's what happens. And it's not, you're following the law, which you have to follow. The problem is DEP hasn't caught up to it. Nobody's looking at the what actually happened. And then nobody comes back to fix it. And the neighbors end up with a mess.
No.
That's our problem.
Were there major cut and fills at that site?
There was some big cuts.
Yeah, we have essentially zero cuts and fills.
Well, you're gonna, you know.
We're grading in the driveway, plus or minus
We have
a
total-
foot or
The problem,
two.
I mean, I've done a lot of work up on Coy Hill, so I know there's a lot of rocks. You start digging, once you start moving rocks, you're gonna be doing some grading, you're gonna be in groundwater, it's gonna be breaking out. You can't help it. It's gonna happen. You know what I mean? And
I designed this to not cut the driveway in because of the,
I don't even mean the driveway. I mean, when you're.
well, no, but that's the only
where you-
place
where
where
you're-
we're really grading.
You're gonna be, well, you're gonna be stumping, you're gonna be running into big rocks that you're gonna have to move. Once you start pulling them out, you're gonna be regrading, and you're gonna be in the groundwater. Groundwater's at the top, regardless of what your numbers say, the groundwater's at the top. And
The whole site would be a wetland if the groundwater's at the top.
it's a pretty wet area up there, isn't it?
So-
It's the wettest area in town.
So,
Ask Skippy Wood, he got his D8 buried up there.
I do have one other question.
Sure.
If we don't exactly know what's going on with the culverts underneath the road from site 3 to 4, how do we know that the calculations are accurate for site 4? Because there may be water moving at different locations up near the top of site 4, near the road.
Well, we know what's going on there because this project does not include any culvert work, as I stated before. If the town would like to pursue new culverts under the roadway, my applicant said they would be more than happy to fund that project, do the design as a partner with the town.
So shouldn't that be done in
No,
conjunction?
no.
So that we make sure
Because
that's not a mistake?
they'd be two separate projects. We would I'd obviously take into account these numbers and make sure I included them in whatever new design I did, but the town may not wanna work with me. I don't know exactly if they have their own consulting engineer that they would wanna hire.
I mean, would it change your calculations on this field if you change the culverts?
Well, I mean, as far as this field goes, no, because the way that area kinda, let's see if I can get a better view.
I did talk to Tom from the highway department, and he is concerned about it. And he is gonna be getting with the solar company. He's gonna review the prints, because he has not yet. So he is gonna look at it, he's gonna come up to the site, look at the site, and see if, yes, indeed, we need to add some more culverts. So he is aware of it.
Okay.
That sounds
Just
like a good first step.
So the hydrology for the pipe there, it takes this runoff from essentially, this wetland is right here. So this is all collecting this flow from lot 3. And then there's a few high points in here which kind of funnel water from this section up in the roadway to this wetland, which is essentially in the right of way, which is formed. And that's where that outlet pipe is. And that pipe goes under this current part of the road, which is on private property, and then continues, it discharges and it kind of goes in that old foundation. And then the water just kind of flows out of that foundation into this wetland and then further up through West Brookfield. So that water is coming from, let's say this area here, being collected and then going up and towards in that direction. Lot 4 is going towards this wetland right through here, which is not connected to that wetland. So there's a break right around through here where, that pipe's mostly collecting roadway water and everything of that nature. So, if we do work, it's gonna mostly be associated with, water coming off of lot 3 and water going into West Brookfield. And that's another concern. I don't think the town of West Brookfield would want Warren's water inundating their, site. So, a lot of things have to be looked at, which is why.
Well, it is already. You're
Correct.
correcting it up to
Well, yeah,
West Brookfield
but
site.
only certain things are in our control. We can only improve our private property.
Right.
We can't tell the town, hey, you need to do this or we're not gonna build this. It doesn't work like
Nick,
that.
if you could go back to CEO 1.1, please.
Okay, so I'm just going to
I'm
interrupt for
sorry,
1
I'm
second.
taking too much time. But
We have, it's okay. We have the DOT at 7:55. Do you mind if we keep on going here, or
Well, I just
are
have
we
a quick
good?
2-minute
All right,
thing.
thanks.
I can be real brief.
Yeah,
Just for kicks, I borrowed a transit from a friend of mine. And I did some measurements along this road here, and where this culvert is here, there's a very small amount of height difference where there's like a little pool right here before it goes through the culvert.
Yeah,
If this exceeds that, your water isn't going to go this way. It's actually going to go down the road over here, and then when you do the measurements along here, it's gonna cut across approximately here if it exceeds this, if the water comes in too quickly.
right,
So
okay.
either it's gonna go across because it has adequate capacity, or it's gonna cut over the top, wear it out, and then come across over here.
Which is below where the panels and they're
Yes.
directing their water.
But it's gonna go on the wetland
It's gonna go in the wetland.
at high speed.
Ah.
After crossing the road.
Right.
It's gonna be one of the two. We just can't tell which way it's gonna flood. I'd rather it not flood. I'd rather it just
That's really actually.
properly engineered and directed.
I know that part
It's
is,
not in our purview right now, because there's no problem with it right now. We
well,
can't.
there
Well,
is,
there's
but
gonna
it's,
be.
It's a future one, but we're not allowed to act in futures.
I get it.
yeah. It is the highways thing.
But again, we are talking about maybe putting some culverts underneath there at some point, and that's gonna change things a bit.
It,
Where are they
I
gonna
mean,
go?
for the record,
You know.
the applicant's committed to seeing this roadway and this roadway system be functional and
Yeah.
not impact the neighbors.
Sure.
So if a new culvert will solve that, they're willing to pay for those upgrades.
okay.
But, you know, so we're not here trying to just throw this solar field up and run away. I mean, these guys, they own the property, it's not a lease situation, they own all 4 properties. They're gonna be here for the long run, for the 25-year period. They're looking, I mean, we're making improvements in West Brookfield, we added a couple catch basins, at the request of the DPW supervisor. So we're doing some additional work up in that area, as I explained to the planning board. If the town of Warren would like additional stormwater management measures funded by the applicant, we're willing to do that. It has nothing to do with this current application, but that's something we're in discussions with our open special permit application with the planning board. We want the roadway to be open, stable, passable at all times
Okay.
for emergency situations to access these panels.
When you, getting back to the stormwater, when you modeled the post site, are you modeling, how do you model wood chips as ground cover? What's your RN?
Curve number, if it's
Your curve number,
71 or 72, meadow, I believe, is
So-
what's standard.
So are you gonna be
procedure
putting meadow in, or is, when the chips go down, or are you putting in, fescue? Like, what are you putting in for ground cover, once the
We're
chips go away?
for posing chips, and we will seed that. Seed mixture would, we don't have an exact seed mix at this moment, but we could come up with a specification.
What do you,
probably,
so how can you model it for
What do you model?
anything without, your R number changes drastically
Correct.
from
In
fescue to
In
meadow.
TR 55, there's no solar panel.
I understand
curve
that,
number.
I'm asking
So
you,
the standard method for modeling the interior of the solar site is the meadow designation, which has been reviewed and approved by the
okay,
consulting
no, I
engineer.
understand this, I
Yes.
understand what you're saying, but what I also do know is that there is a very big difference in how water behaves when it is grass, short grass
Yes.
versus meadow, and if a lot of sites are putting in grass,
Mhm.
and they're trying to model it as meadow, which is like cheating. So what we're saying is that if you are not going to put in meadow and have that in your specifications, then your RNCN number needs to go
I misunderstood the
down.
question. So the maintenance plan, once this does get seeded and begins to vegetate, after the wood chips begin to degrade, as we talked about, the maintenance plan is to let the grass grow to a height of about 2+ feet, and then they typically come in with a brush mower a few times a season and They don't, they're not out there maintaining like a golf course manicured style lawn, like a low lawn.
Right.
It's more of a, like you said, like a fescue, something with a higher, like almost like a
Fescue
brush.
doesn't grow that tall.
Oh, sorry.
That's the whole point. Fescue doesn't really grow
Sorry,
that tall.
more like a meadow, like the meadow designation, like a higher,
You don't really, you don't really know then
Excuse
what
me?
you're doing.
no, that's what we're doing. That's the maintenance plan. They come in with a brush cutter, once the vegetation,
Well, no, you don't know what you're planning for a meadow mix.
You don't really know what you're doing. You just said that you're gonna
You're
do.
just gonna let grass
You
grow.
just
Well,
said
no.
you were gonna do fescue and now you're like saying it's.
I misspoke, I apologize. But the current ground cover is still in flux with the site plan approval process. They could say, loam and seed the entire site.
Sure.
And plant a certain type of seed mix. And we would comply with that, if that's the end goal requirement.
But our only concern is if it would change your curve numbers though, right?
No, it would not.
It should,
It will.
it should, and it
From
will.
meadow
From
to
the
fescue,
wood
it's a
chip-
big difference.
From the
From
wood
wood
chip,
chips to, if you put just low lying grass, fescue down versus meadow,
well, I
it's
mean,
a different curve number.
it's not gonna, it wouldn't be maintained as low-lying grass. Like I said, the plan is for it to vegetate to, like I said, a height 2 to 3 feet, and they use a brush cutter, they're not coming in.
From what we understand,
mow it.
if you run them as meadow, you gotta put meadow in. That's what, I mean, you gotta put in what you ran your numbers at. And meadow mix is a lot different
Well,
than
there's no
fescue mix.
designation for wood chips. So
You just said, you said you used the same curves as meadow though, right?
Correct, and that's
Okay, so-
the
So then,
approved
so then
standard
we would
curve
expect to
number.
see meadow mix
for
on the,
underneath
all we're
the
saying
solar
is we'd
panel.
expect to see meadow mix on the plan, that's all. If your curves are for metal mix, then make sure then you're gonna put a metal mix in there and maintain it as metal. That's all. You're not gonna put fescue or you're not gonna put.
Correct, no,
So
if
that's
you-
all we're asking for.
If you'd like to make that a condition of the approval, we'd be more than happy to comply with
Because
that.
otherwise your curve numbers are gonna be wrong.
And if you'd like to make a recommendation to the planning board on the final type of ground cover, please do, so they're aware of what this board would like to see for final ground cover. If you'd like to see something other than the wood chips, if you'd like to see a certain type of seed mix,
Well, we
please,
just wanna make sure it's within the curves you designed it for, that's all.
okay,
Whatever you designed it for, that's what's gonna be in the front, that's
that
all.
will be installed.
Okay.
Okay, so you have new numbers, you have a new basin based from the point that, you originally submitted this data, and they haven't been peer reviewed.
The basin hasn't changed.
The basin has changed since your original, and since Graves has, done their peer review, yes.
No,
The basin was a different shape and it had a different outlet.
They reviewed this basin.
No, they haven't reviewed this basin. What we have is the dates of this before this basin was approved. You
What
moved
dates
this
is-
after, you moved this the day after,
What
We-
dates are you referencing?
where is I don't have Graves' report on me, but it was, they didn't have this basin.
They reviewed this plan.
He submitted it like a couple of weeks before you came in here with this.
Their final letter was 2 weeks before our last meeting, which had this basin. It didn't have the check dams or this inlet structure. It had this inlet structure, it didn't have this or the check dams.
It was a half a page peer review for a.
Because nothing changed.
Site. No, because that was the whole peer review.
Oh.
The peer review was
Well,
a half a page.
As much as this board thinks the methodology is on this design is totally made up and not
Well, your
compliant.
basins
it-
were underground and you
it
let it
is-
go.
It is in compliance with the regulation. That's why the review letter was so
Your
narrow.
basins were underwater, you didn't have test pits, you didn't do any test pits
They
on the
were-
site, that's not in
For the record,
compliance.
they reviewed, their first review was after we did the testing and
Well,
applied that.
just to be honest with
applied that
you,
information.
matter of fact, because I caught that basin was underwater, your argument was that it had already been peer reviewed and accepted underwater. So.
I beg to
that- I
differ.
just- Well, you changed it
I
after
did,
that.
to satisfy the request of this board, I did.
But
And it's still in a compliant state with regards to peak flow discharges. I'm working with this commission, we've made all the requested changes that have been asked of this project.
I'm not sure, I'm almost sure that Graves didn't peer review that basin.
So, look at the dates.
All right,
They peer reviewed it. If it isn't, then it's gotta be done.
Nick, sorry, we're not doing wood chips no more, we're doing metal now?
No, we're proposing wood chips. We're proposing wood chips. If the
Why don't
planning
we
board,
just go to metal
if
instead
the
of wood
planning
chips,
board,
if that's what everybody wants to see?
It's
The
not
guy
that-
said that it would be fine.
I don't think it's, what, we're not making them do metal. It's just that if he curbs it at metal, then we just wanna make sure that the, what's there meets what he designed. We don't want him to, that's what our concern is.
So why don't you just make it not easy on yourself and say, okay, that's what we're gonna go with instead of wood chips?
to be honest, the site performs better with wood chips.
I agree with him.
It does.
The wood
It's
chips
better,
work
it's better
very,
for the
very well.
neighbors, it's better for the site.
For a short term, they work phenomenal.
for short term, for long term, it doesn't.
We lived there for a long time, so.
And you guys lived there for a long time, so
The only-
I
I'm not
have
moving in the
concerns.
next few years.
My only,
so-
my biggest concern is quantity, having enough. You know, it's a lot, and they're not gonna have enough,
Well,
because the trees
5
are already
inches
gone.
for,
And most of the tree guys are gonna ship the stuff from power plants anyways, they don't wanna leave it for mulch. I mean, they'll do the stumps and stuff, but, so there's gonna be required quite a bit of,
and then you have to ship it in, because you're not gonna have enough.
You already said you weren't shipping anything in.
No, we didn't make that statement.
Yeah, you did make that statement. You said everything's gonna be chipped on site and that's.
We're
gonna
not
be
taking,
used.
we don't wanna take any logs out to reduce truck traffic on the roadway. No, they're talking about if we don't have enough wood chips, we'll have to bring some in, which
Yeah.
we would have to. I mean, we'd like to close. We feel there's no outstanding issues. We'd like to close the public hearing.
We need to confirm that this has been peer reviewed.
And I can tell you with 100% certainty that that basin has been peer reviewed.
I am pretty sure that it's not, and it hasn't been.
Is that the only, on the record, is that the only outstanding issue? Or are we gonna receive an email with additional concerns and requested plan changes after we go on record another time saying, we have no other outstanding issues?
I have one more question.
I'd like an answer for the record. If we're just waiting on Graves' engineering letter, we'd be more than happy to continue this one more hearing. Or excuse me, confirmation that Graves reviewed this basin, which, as I'm stating, 100% confident that they reviewed this plan.
Are we good? Did you answer the question about the water temperature?
With regards to,
The change of temperature?
why would the water temperature change substantially?
Because it's sitting in a basin for 72 hours, it's being funneled out
The
of one
details
pipe.
provided in the documentation in the letter, this basin's gonna dewater within 24 hours.
The details, which are new calculations or existing calculations, and does it show a temperature change?
They're just essentially sections pulled with, that are highlighted that show that the basin will dewater within the required 72 hours, as you can see in the
Right.
back of the
But
letter.
so
and I
does
believe
that
this
answer the
basin-
temperature issue?
There's no standard requirement for temperature of the water leaving the detention basin.
There is a standard for DEP that the water temperature doesn't increase, water that is flowing into the wetlands does not increase because of the changes that you made in,
Correct, and what
On
I'm
the
saying is,
site.
within the 24-hour dewatering period of the basin, that's up to the 100-year storm. That there will be no substantial change in water temperature versus the surface water which flows.
I know that's
to the
what you said,
wetlands
but
area.
how do you have the calculations performed?
There is no calculation,
So then how do you know?
because it's only gonna be possibly sitting in the basin for 24
72
hours.
hours.
24 hours as shown by the calculations.
Is it 24 or wasn't it 72 for a,
72 is the requirement under stormwater guidelines.
but you're saying that
This
water is
basin-
actually gonna leave in 24 hours?
As we talked about before, because we have the outlet relatively low to the bottom of the basin.
I see.
So this basin, we said the outlet's about 8/10 of a foot. The first outlet is about 8/10 of a foot from or excuse me, let me get the exact number here. Half a foot from the bottom of the basin. So it's gonna dewater. So we're not gonna have water being held where the temperature is rising drastically, that would affect the level of safety of the wetlands. It's gonna dewater rather quickly.
Oh, it's gonna dewater quickly now. I thought we were slowing it down.
Rather quickly with regards to the,
I've heard several different things.
Yeah, it's,
It's like
we
it's all
don't-
over the board. Every
Depends
time
on
you
which
say
question
something,
you
it's
ask.
a different thing. I mean, that's
No,
the
it's-
problem with this conversation, is that it is going like this.
it's
Correct.
your story, Nick.
correct. The story is that the basin will dewater within 24 hours as shown by the calculations. That's the story,
Okay, so it's gonna dewater in 24 hours.
correct.
And we have no evidence that it's going to maintain the same temperature. You don't know. I mean,
Can I
you
ask
just
this board
don't know.
one question?
Yeah.
What's the precedent for this comment? Have you made other applicants analyze water temperature at the
We-
discharge point?
Have generally.
And I would like to see that documentation if that is the case. It's all public file. If a
Sure.
project has been made to comply with some type of
It hasn't, but you
unwritten,
know what? It
unwritten
has
standard,
changed.
I
Is
would
that-
like to see the documentation approved by this board for a separate project.
This is what you will find, is that DEP has changed what they are requiring of, it's not our board, it is DEP has said, we are no longer interested in seeing basins in the buffer zone. Move them out, get them out of there, they are changing the temperature, and we need them to prove that they're not, because we're experiencing problems statewide. We got this at the MACC conference. That is why you are the one who gets to hear it first from us. It's not that we did this for other ones, we allowed other ones in there, but DEP is like saying, no, we don't want this, don't want it. So they
If
would like us,
DEP has issued a guideline on how to determine,
well, it'll take a year and a half to get in the
Okay.
books.
Well,
So
well,
I'm
we
just
will-
telling you what they told us at the conference, is that we would like to see these pulled away, or at least data just that says that they are not going to be warming up the
And-
wetlands.
I believe that conversation was for basins that are right up against the edge of the wetland.
No, it
Remember,
wasn't.
These discharge points are also
50 feet.
more, 65 feet away from the wetlands at their closest point.
65 being because the pipe,
This is- That's, yes, that's the end of the closest pipe, right here. This is the 50-foot buffer, that's 15 feet, and then that's 50 feet. So in addition to regulating the temperature in the basin dewatering within a timely fashion, it has that 65 feet of natural flow till it hits the edge of the wetland to mitigate if there was a temperature rise. It has that additional distance to mitigate that minor possible increase in temperature.
and what is between the pipe, well, the riprap?
A little bit of riprap and 50 feet
And-
of undisturbed.
What undisturbed, is it shrubbery, is it grass, is it dirt, like what is it, what's there right now, and what's it going to be, are you changing it?
We're not going any closer to the buffer zone. This is all natural vegetation.
Yep, okay. Do you know what it is?
It's wooded. Not, I wouldn't say it's densely wooded in this area, but I mean, it's, I call it, it's a wooded area.
Okay.
So is that gonna cut a channel through?
It's all the conditions, right, the conditions.
Right.
We gotta do something.
So we would like to see, I need to make sure that Graves did review this, and which date.
After he said he was slowing it down, I'm saying speeding it up. So
Yeah, because it's gonna cut a channel through that wood line then, right to the wetland.
The riprap has a level spreader.
No, it's just a
No, it's not a little.
flared end section
It's
with
not.
a decent amount of riprap at the end.
Just trying to slow it down a little bit.
Just, is it, so how wide is that?
What?
The flared end.
The flared end section, it's about 1.5 pipe diameter.
Oh, I see.
So, and then you
Yeah.
have the pads
So it's gonna cut a
about
channel.
30 feet wide.
Yep.
I mean, if you'd like us to install additional riprap within the buffer zone, I could make that change. It'd be more disturbance in the buffer zone.
Well, another thing that some sites have
Sorry,
done is that
I'm
they put something on the end of the pipe to
or the level spreader?
No, it wasn't a level spreader, you know what I'm talking about? It's a, you know, it's something to go on the water, so it ends up,
Well, they do, the riprap will do that.
The flared end section?
Not the,
Like
the
Not the-
riprap will do it, the water comes out, it hits the riprap just to break it up a little bit.
And under the riprap, we put erosion control fabric
right.
to make sure that, you know, we're not,
I mean, so, I mean,
Over the bottom.
ultimately, it does, the water does find its favorite spot to go through, whether there's riprap there or not, it will find its favorite spot. And
You get a new stream.
you get a new stream
Yeah.
from the stream.
and, you know, for the record, I understand, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, I'm just looking for the email from Graves Engineering that shows that this was reviewed, but a project like this, you know, large land disturbance, you can have the most highest paid engineering company draw the most detailed set of plans. It's gonna come down to implementing it, construction observation, post-development observations, and minor tweaks that happen along the way. I'm not trying to sit here and say, there will never be an area that ruts or channelized flow that occurs or a minor washout that will ever occur here. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that this design complies with the standards, and if issues arise, we will address them during the construction phase and during the maintenance of the project. I mean, these guys can't afford to have the road washed out. I mean, the fire department needs these roads for public safety. If something happens, it gets maintained, and then we evaluate why it happened. So I just want to go on record that, you know, if there are sediment issues or something's not working right during construction, we do the inspections, we make the changes, and we address the issues during construction. And if you'd like to make that a condition, that we provide bi-weekly reports during construction to this, I mean, obviously you guys are allowed to come on site whenever you want, but we've been more than happy to provide you with construction inspection reports. We'll notify you if there's any issues. If there is if for some horrible reason we have channelized flow and it comes down and gets into the wetland, we're gonna notify this board. And we are fine with those conditions that work throughout construction to ensure that this thing's it's built right, it works right, and that there are no issues once this site is completed.
I got one more question.
Mhm.
You talked about the fire chief. Now, I know he's been going back and forth with you guys a little bit. Is it gonna change anything with how this is set up now, his proposed changes?
I don't believe so, no. It's mostly to talk about the battery storage.
Correct.
So we actually put a large package together with him. I had a call with the chief last week. He met with the West Brookfield Fire Chief. They had a powwow together, so their concern is battery storage and if additional containment is required for the battery system, and we're getting them all the documentation on that. With regards to the batteries, they are lithium-ion batteries, but they're what they call dry lithium-ion battery. So in the whole battery containment system, there's probably maybe a couple gallons worth of product. So these aren't lead-acid batteries, that you have a large volume of possible contaminant. These batteries are stored in a specifically engineered sealed container, climate control, has its own fire suppression system, and there's containment within the battery box, and then you have secondary containment being the container itself.
So you have an engine system inside there?
100%. I learned about that on the conference call with Con Edison. I
What
said,
system?
Suppresses the air and takes out the oxygen out of the
Oh,
Yeah.
container, so it suffocates the fire. It's
it's good
very,
for,
it's great for fires, but if you're caught in there, you're dead.
yeah. I mean, that's why it's a sealed container, and it's good for electronics, so for the batteries. So if there was an issue, it's remotely monitored. So, and they kind of went through the levels of
'Cause
alarms.
last time we talked about there was no fire suppression, and
To be
go back
honest,
and forth with the chief, there really should be a fire suppression system inside there.
there always was, that's not my specialty, I was never made aware of that, that's
Oh,
why I
okay.
said, I need to get on a conference
So you
call with
learned
these guys.
something.
I learned a whole lot about these containers, so.
That's pretty
We're gonna
good.
be submitting a package to the fire chief that has all this information, that kinda goes through all that, so. Sorry
Okay.
about that.
Oh,
I know that's been a concern of these guys for a
I know,
while, so
it's,
that's why.
it's a good concern, actually, I think they
Well,
all been.
Lithium-ion batteries, when they burn, certain types give off hydrogen fluoride gas, which when it contacts water, turns into hydrofluoric acid, which is very nasty. And we're living next to this, so
We drink
we're
that water.
concerned.
Details.
We're concerned.
Right.
Which
yeah.
is why they're in a sealed container with their own fire suppression system.
And you have a berm around it now, right?
Yeah, we're gonna work with the fire department on that and see.
Yeah, so
what would be
he's
preferred.
interested in having a,
Because we probably have to we have to put the container, we have to have the container raised so it's not sitting in water.
Mhm.
You know, so.
Good.
okay, so we would need that information and I guess orders, do you have any other? All right. Then we will, can I have a motion to continue the hearing until?
So, for the record,
for
the
record.
only thing left open to be discussed at the final
Okay,
hearing
okay, yes, is.
is
Graves.
confirmation
We have
from
is Graves?
confirmation from Graves Engineering
Are we
that
okay with the water?
this detention basin in this configuration has been reviewed and approved.
Well, I tell you what, there's nothing else, it seems, that you are willing to do at this point with this. So, yes, this is fine. Whether we approve this or not is another thing, but all of the questions that we have asked, you have answered in one way or another. The last thing that we're going to do is look at Graves's, and then we'll make a decision on whether we approve this or not, based on all the data that you gave us.
Okay, can I take 1 minute to look for one quick email?
Should we check on the planning board for this? This is their peer review, right?
This is their peer review.
I mean, get the latest one that they have on file.
Right. The only one that I have is, it's at home. What are you looking for?
I'm looking for the letter.
Can we, is it? Can we move on? Can we close this out?
So there's no copy of the current correspondence from
I don't have it on me.
not in the file?
Do you might have it, do you have it in the file? I don't have it on me. I
It
left
was February 21st.
the big portion of it.
Is it lot 7 or lot 8? 'Cause I don't know.
Be lot 4, but it just looked like.
Well, you
I
guys,
have it on the lots.
you guys put, there was different numbers
Yeah.
given.
Oh, 7 and 8, yeah. It was a review of the entire, for both sides, 3
I
and
didn't
4.
write the other.
Okay,
It's
so
on one file.
you may not have had it anyway because it was something that I got from the planning board and it wasn't given to us by you.
Oh,
So it wasn't something that was submitted by, this company, Little. Okay, I'm gonna ask for a motion to continue the public hearing until the next meeting date, which is what?
April 10th, and it's the second Wednesday.
April 10th. And how about at 7, we're gonna do it at 7:40.
7:40.
I'll make a motion to continue the hearing
till April 10th at 7:40.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I am going to quickly, because I didn't do this, I'm going to open and close the public hearing for, can I have a motion to both open and close the public hearing for 777 Coy Hill?
I'll make a motion to open and close a hearing for 77 Coy Hill Road.
They called and asked for a continuance, and we will do that, Corinne, at 7:15. See, I remember that was good. Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
And we are very late for the public meeting for the Mass Pike.
Sorry, had a lot of questions.
Sorry. We can, hi Pete.
Evening.
How are
Nice-
ya?
Nice to see you again.
It's been a while.
Well, been a few years.
It has.
My name's Robert Nazario. You might remember me from other
Yes.
Mass Pike projects and the downtown project. Hopefully you're all
Oh
enjoying
my
it.
God, right.
So just real quickly, it's only been one of the shortest presentations of from an application in history, but we submitted a very straightforward test for determination of applicability to your commission.
Right.
Oh, Corinne, can you need that?
Yeah.
For resurfacing on I-90, resurfacing, milling and resurfacing is proposed within the existing travel lanes. There may be additional work within the existing lanes for, and I included it in the work description, which would include adjusting and or rebuilding drainage structures, highway guardrail sections, recessed thermoplastic pavement markings, asphalt berm, safety controls, erosion sedimentation controls, control measures, milling mulch for shoulders, excavation of buildup sediment at the roadway edge, to restore country drainage and other incidental items required to complete the work. Tree trimming and cutting will be completed, avoiding resource areas and as shown in the attached cross sections. So to explain the cross sections were.
I know they're like almost identical. I look at all of these, I'm like, what?
What's the difference? Yeah.
What is the difference between?
I can point out a few things, but specifically, the cross sections were designed and drawn to meet the exemptions of the Wetlands Protection Act. So, when you look at the cross sections of the pavement, it's basically just showing where the work is going to consist of.
Right.
And it's basically from just over white line to just over white line. That's how we usually refer to it.
Oh, right, yeah.
Okay, as far as the paving. Now, when you get to the next couple of cross sections, this sort of ramp, again, it's within the lines or just outside of the lines if there's damage or things like that.
Yeah.
That comes up in the milling. The next cross sections again were drawn to meet the exemptions, and this just shows the different examples of possible tree trimming, brush cutting, if there's a bridge, different corners of a bridge, or the measurements coming off of side slope clearing, either on a ramp or on the main line. And then this cross section, or typical section, shows tree cutting measurements within the median or outside, on the outside. Again, it was drawn specifically to go with this RDA to meet what's existing conditions and what the exemptions are. So the intent of the project is to resurface, but also we want to include in there, just in case when they're milling, if there was, say, a catch basin that was, needed to be touched up. If a car or truck had hit some guardrail, they're already right there to fix up the guardrail. In most areas along this stretch, there's milling mulch underneath the guardrail. So if if it needed to be touched up, they could touch that out, that's why I included that in there. Same with the tree clearing. I've been on this stretch a couple of times to review it prior to coming here this evening. There's no resource areas within this stretch, within the work area. The riverfront is actually, riverfront, any flood zones is actually outside of the work area due to the length of the culverts that cross. So
I'm
there is,
thinking like by, Little Rest Road and,
Street.
Brook Road.
Yeah, Brook Road.
oh, I was, the Brook Road, no, I was thinking Little Rest Road, cause I've been under that culvert in, is it Bemis Road? Little Rest turns into Bemis Road,
could be.
like somewhere around there. Little Rest, if you keep on
Oh,
going.
Little Rest, yeah, okay, I'm sorry, yeah.
So, you're saying the wetlands, I mean, you know, there's like a culvert here, and then the wetlands are over there. So when you are near wetlands, and you're grinding up the pavement, it mostly, it doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't like fly
Right,
off the side of the road?
right.
Go,
No,
say.
that's a good question, and millings are removed same time or same day. 99% of the time, especially in something like this, the millings are removed at the same exact time, either with the same exact equipment or with it's like a convoy that follows. The vacuum, truck and brush goes along right with the milling.
And
That's
then,
a standard process.
so what happens to them? Do you guys, do you reuse them?
It's decision of the contractor, taken off-site. Now, they can reuse those if they're if they produce paving, asphalt, or if their subcontractor they can use that material again, produce new asphalt. They can use it to make millings.
Yeah,
They can do a number of things with it, but at that point, they're getting paid to remove it. So it's removed off-site by truck.
and then the areas that are by the wetlands,
What areas?
there's no, you're saying there's no areas by wetlands through the whole town of Warren? That seems almost unheard of, really?
Okay, not for resurfacing, no. No, there's no wetlands up up within that.
They're like
Maybe.
5 feet back, 10 feet back?
Oh, there's dozens and dozens and dozens of feet back.
Really?
I went up and down the corridor,
Even on the,
yeah. It's a massive layout. It's a massive layout. The bed of the turnpike can be 60 and 70 feet wide, just for eastbound or westbound.
right,
So there's not wetlands within those corridors.
well, they're not inside the road, but on the side of the road.
Yeah, not on that side of the road. Way off, down slope,
Are you doing, you're doing,
we're not doing slope work, we're not doing grading, we're not doing topo changes, we're not doing beyond the guardrail, grading.
oh, you're not at all?
There's no soil disturbance.
Are
There
you
is an
just
arm-
doing one lane?
No.
You're doing both sides?
Both lanes on both sides, again, line to line. That's the intent, is doing it line to line.
And-
We're not restructuring, we're not reconstructing
Right, okay,
the bed of the,
Alright.
you know,
that's good.
if there was
Yeah.
wetlands, believe me, I would
It
have,
says it's good.
if there was wetlands, believe me, I would have called them out.
Mike says it's good.
Mike, do you say it's good?
Yeah,
Is this good?
I got doubts. Anytime you got the state involved in anything.
Well, I'm a person, and I'm also a wetland scientist since 1980s. I went up and down the site, I didn't see wetlands.
Well, I mean, there's, the pike does go over a culvert or two, or
Okay.
3 along the way. All right,
Oh, yeah.
what do we got? What do we have to do? Do we have to, do I have all the paperwork here? Mass. Did you bring the Form 2?
I didn't know that I was supposed to bring it in the form.
Okay, every time we have an RDA, we need, can you go and
RDA,
get one?
what form is it again?
It's Form 2, right? The determination of applicability. You should have one.
I don't think I have one in here, but minute, there's probably one back. Just see what's here. Oh. There's one in here. Is it just one of the page?
Nope, it's a few pages.
All right, so this is just the signature pages here then, not the whole thing. I've got the signature page, I'll run and get the first page.
All right, can you go and get and print out if you must? We have an issue with negative determination, and what did you read? I'm gonna just pull this up on here, because they changed the form.
Yeah, this just has the signature page.
All right, we can do that,
And run and get the first page?
please. The first, I think there's more than one page.
Yeah, it says 4 or 5,
Yep,
but they're not on the A4. 3, notice of
all
intent.
right.
This is the whole RDA.
DEP documents, permitting forms,
It's the RDA, special conditions.
RDA, and it's Form 2.
It's 5. Special conditions. Oh, for some reason, that one's not the whole thing.
You did C, whether the work depicted on plans is subject to the wetlands, and it is number 2.
That one, signature sheets.
You're saying it's not within an area subject to protection? I say,
Well, it's maintenance work, so it doesn't matter anyway, it's excluded.
right. The area, the work described in the, is within an area subject to protection, but will not remove, fill, dredge, or alter that area.
It's not,
The work described is within the buffer zone, but will not alter area. Therefore, said work does not require the filing of a notice of except for. You're saying it's not within, there's no wetlands anywhere on here.
Okay.
What, let's be the technical. There's wetlands, you're just not altering any of them.
That's correct.
Okay.
yeah, not
Buffer
working.
zones.
Yeah.
Buffer
Okay,
zones
so
do
we are
exist,
gonna
yes.
do number 2. Can I have a motion for negative determination 2? Which is the work described is with an area subject to protection but won't do anything, therefore you don't need a notice of intent.
You expect me to say all of that?
No, just say, I'd like a motion for a negative determination 2.
I'd like to make a motion for a negative determination for, what, number 2, subject to?
Number 2, and that's for the Mass DOT
Mass
project.
DOT project.
All right, good enough.
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
Fabulous. Okay. You're ready?
Thank you.
Yes.
One question?
Yeah.
Do you have a portion of your agenda for scheduled topics, or is that already gone by?
Say that again?
Do you have a portion on your agenda for unscheduled topics that could not
It
be
has
scheduled?
not, and you are welcome to bring something up.
Okay. Will I do it now, or would I wait? I don't mind waiting.
No, you can do it now.
Okay,
You're here.
okay, thank you. I just want to mention that Mass DOT is working with designer for possible reconstruction of the bridge, which is just right over here by the pizza shop.
Oh, God.
Okay.
Right.
So you will be receiving letters, if you haven't already, coordination letters. They might have been sent already. They go down through the town departments, but there should be also letters sent directly to you, which you may or may not have received in the
We
past
did
6
receive
months.
something about
Okay.
work being done there at one
Okay.
point.
Okay.
Yeah.
State bridges, you may or may not have familiarity with them, and I'm not gonna assume that you do, so I'll just talk as if you haven't worked on bridge projects before. The initial permitting goes through DEP in Boston. It also goes through New England Regional Office of Army Corps. So it's almost like it's elevated, if you will, to that level. Copies of those permits, when they're submitted, go to you for your review.
Okay,
If you have questions on them, sometimes I'm included on the emails as CC'd, sometimes I'm not. If you had questions, if you wanted someone to come in, I'm always more than happy to come in and discuss those.
sure.
I'm usually pretty responsive. I try to get back to everybody within a matter of a day or two. I'm local, pretty much regularly in the area. So just want to bring it to your attention. It might be a year or two off.
Oh, really?
But
It's
there's
not
a
sooner?
There's a design public hearing that will probably take place in 2019
Okay,
that the public and boards and commissioners will be invited to. But I just wanted to open up that dialogue because there will be questions.
You're gonna keep the lights?
What's that?
You're gonna keep the lights and the railings, or you're gonna make it look like the Zaker Bridge?
That.
oh, that would be cool. Huh, right
Maybe-
through Warren?
That's a fair question. That's a fair question. A lot of that, believe it or not, goes from the very beginning through with the historic commission or whoever else, you know, say, I'm gonna say town elders, it could be town council, city council, or select board involved in that. A lot of towns have planters or special lights that match up with other parts of the town that you wanna, so that's usually something that goes through that process. It is a big discussion part of it, yeah, for sure. So,
What the Mass Pike resurfacing, is that this year? Is that the plan to do?
it could be.
Oh, you're not sure then?
It could,
There's no
it
definite.
could start as early, you know, as the spring, which is already sprung, but early summer.
All right, so I mean, it possibly.
Possible.
Funding availability, I take it, meaning, right?
Right.
When the funding comes, it's gonna happen. Right, so there's no definite plans yet.
Okay,
Thanks for taking the extra time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
thanks for being patient and waiting too, I appreciate that.
Sure, absolutely. Pleasure. Thank you again.
All right, thank you. All right, we should sign this.
See what time it is?
What's that?
See what time it is?
See?
They said one of the earliest ones ever.
Like I promised.
Yeah, an hour. An hour and 45 minutes. Not bad. So, you know, we
Well, it
had
took
one.
2 years to get there.
Yeah, we had one bail. And I,
No,
and I
you
must say, you got a mean streak. I don't care what anybody says. Turn that thing off. Whoa!
Wow,
Wow is right. Holy cow!
really?
He was fuming. Talk about smoke
He
coming
gets
out.
fuming all the time.
Yes, he does. And you just kept turning him
Is
off.
that off?
No.
Turn it off.
You
Turn it
just-
off,
you
please.
just- You just kept turning him up.
Okay. You adjourning soon? Well, it doesn't make a difference.
I'm asking you to turn it off.